All right, Darksiders. So the 5th episode of Falcon and the Winter Soldier was absolutely fantastic. And first off, let me say this. Stay with me through this whole video and share it too if what I say to you in this video makes sense, because I noticed something. And I didn't see it really until this 5th episode when they brought full circle Isaiah's story. But I noticed something. I said, listen, I'm going to put it in front of the Darksiders to see what they think about it. But let's get started with the beginning in that first opening scene. How fantastic was that? The whole build-up when we see Agent Walker running and he's having these flashbacks, he's thinking about all these different things. See, people hate Agent Walker, but I think Agent Walker really wanted to do what was right. I just don't think he was not the man for the job. He didn't have the temperament for the job, and the serum exposed that. But even now, he struggles to do what was right because he really wants to be the Captain America that he's supposed to be. So when we see Bucky and Falcon catch up with them and they have this conversation, and Falcon is trying to talk him down. Falcon is trying to de-escalate things. And that's something I noticed about Falcon. That's been his tenor throughout this whole series. He's always been one to try and de-escalate things, to try and bring things down. His first reaction is not violence, which is interesting because he has that in common with Rogers. Now, I say that's interesting because that is a setup for him having the right temperament to own the shield. But they go back and forth with him. They cannot convince him to give up the shield. And, you know, Agent Walker is like, that's what this is really about. I'm not giving up the shield. I am Captain America. And there is a part of him that can't let go of that within his psyche. And then that fight is epic. I mean, when he tears off Falcon's wings, I was like, ooh, I felt that. And the intensity of that fight, I really, really enjoy. I love the fight choreography, and how they use Falcon's wings in the fight is always so impressive to me. But think about the timing of that. And I wonder if they did a lot of their own stunts. The timing of that, the way that it was shot, so well done, brought so much intensity in the opening moments of the show. And I thought it was absolutely fantastic. Now, here's an interesting thing. I don't know if you guys noticed this or not. Unless I missed something, if I did, let me know. That is the only fight scene in this whole show. In this whole episode, it's the only fight scene. But yet, think about how good this episode was. That's some good storytelling right there. Because everything else was all story-driven. So at the end of this opening scene, I love how Bucky throws the shield. We get that nice tight close-up between Falcon and the shield on the ground, and Bucky walks off. Almost as if to say, here, we got it back. It's your shield. Don't you give this shield away. It's your shield. And then he walks off, and we know that he's going to go deal with Zemo. So if we jump to Zemo, I love this scene too, because I feel like this is a defining moment for Bucky in this scene when they're having this conversation, and Zemo's making this last-ditch effort to try and get into Bucky's head. And he tells her, listen, the girl has been radicalized. She's not coming back. You can't save her. The only way that you can get rid of her is you have to kill her. And they have this conversation, and Bucky says, basically, we're going to handle it my own way or our own way. And he points the gun at Zemo, and he pulls the trigger. And then we find that there's no bullets in the gun. Now, this is Bucky's defining moment, because to me, this is really him signifying to Zemo, you're not in control of me anymore. You're not in my head. And I love that as we see the bullets drop to the ground, and we see the Dora come and take him. And then we get that little Easter egg about them putting him in the raft. Also, I love how he calls in this last favor, which I do think is going to be a link to Shuri, who I think that we will see, or Shuri, who I think that we will see in episode 6. And we know by the end of this episode that is the Wakandans have probably developed this new suit for Falcon. I mean, we don't really know, you know, but we don't see it, right? But we know that that has happened. Now, if we jump to Falcon as he's taking the shield back to Isaiah. And this is what I noticed in this episode, and I also noticed it in other episodes as well. And this is what I want to put before you. This is what I want you to think about. So he takes the shield back to Isaiah, and Isaiah's in the back watering his plants. And Isaiah already knows what's in the bag, and he's like, is that the shield? And Isaiah says, listen, I don't want anything to do with that. Those stars and stripes do not mean anything to me. Now, here's what's interesting about this conversation, and I'm wondering if you picked it up. Isaiah proceeds to tell the story about what happened. And Falcon now has a full picture of why Isaiah feels the way that he does. He had a small picture of it before when he met him with Bucky, but now he's gotten a full story. Now notice Isaiah's position here. Isaiah tells him what happened. Isaiah says, listen, they experimented on us. They told us it was tetanus, and then they sent us on missions, and some of us didn't come back. And then for those that did get caught, they basically said, listen, we're not going to try and save them. Just blow the whole thing up and be done with it. We know that Isaiah breaks out and brings them back, but they still lose their lives. He gets locked up for 30 years, and then they experiment on him to find out how it is that he was the only one that the serum took. They withheld letters from his loved ones. This is his relationship with the U.S. government. So he has a perspective here, and he shares that with Falcon, and even tells Falcon, listen, I used to be just like you until I opened my eyes. And I could see that these people don't care about me, and they don't care about you. There's no way that you could be Captain America because you're black. They're not going to let you do it. And even if they did let you do it, he goes on to put a heavy weight on Falcon's shoulders by saying, and if any black man would do it, I don't know why they would. This country is not for you. Now think about that, brother. Now, here's what's interesting. You have Isaiah here, who has a position because of his experience, because of what he's gone through with the country. He is soured on the U.S. He does not believe that the U.S. is a place that can adequately or will ever really care about the African American. But this is not the same position that Falcon holds. Falcon can resonate with some of the stuff that Isaiah is saying, because Falcon even makes a comment like, listen, I'm from the South. I get it about some of the racial things that happened. But he's not where Isaiah is. He's not in the same space. It's not been his experience in America. It's not been the same as Isaiah's. And he expresses that. Now he tells Isaiah that, listen, I want to learn. I want to know what happens. And at the end of the story, when we find out all that Isaiah had gone through, we find out that he had been locked up. He'd been getting letters from his loved one. They never gave the letters to him. He's moved by that. Falcon is moved by that. And Falcon says, listen, we got to do something. We got to tell some people. I know folks that can help. We can't let this stand. We got to let this get out. What's Isaiah's response? Isaiah's response is, who do you know that can help? If you out me, I'll be dead within a day. He still has this outlook, this idea of America. And Falcon is thinking, that's not true. Things are different. I can help you with that. Here's what I love about that. It presents a dual position of how folks think about race, and in particular, how two black folks think about race. Too often what happens when we see these subjects covered in TV shows is we, the viewer, kind of roll back into our own mentality, and we tend to think in a very singular, one-tracked way, when the issue of race in this country, in America, is much more nuanced than that. See, you can have someone that thinks that racism is still prevalent and thinks that racism is even systematic, a systematic problem in the country, but that does not mean that that person hates all white people. Or that doesn't mean that that person thinks that everybody in America is racist, even if they think there is something systematic going on. But what we tend to do is we tend to put people in a department, in a compartment, and then cast this broad view of thinking on everybody. When the issue of race in America is much more nuanced. It's much more gray. There are much more variations in the way that different African Americans think about what's going on in race in America. And you can be someone that thinks that there is something systematic going on in the country, but still does not have any gripe against white people. I would be an example of that. I certainly think that there are some systematic things going on. I know within my own job, I have experienced racism directly, but do I think that all white people are racist? No, nuanced. And that's what we see in this show. And I love how they did this. They brought Isaiah Bradley's story to a close in this show. Sam is given this heavy weight to deal with that Isaiah's put on him, because we know now that Sam has the shield. But Isaiah's saying, listen, as a black man, you can't take that shield. But Sam is working through all of this because he doesn't have the same outlook as Isaiah. And I love the way that they write this into the show. And as we progress through this episode, we see that Sam continues to kind of deal with this thinking. And even his sister says, listen, you can't let what Isaiah says get in your head, even though she doesn't know the full story. And Sam's response is, this is important. Sam's response is, that dude has been through a lot. And honestly, if I had been through all that that dude had been through, I might think the same thing. Here's why that's important. Even though Sam is not completely where Isaiah is in his thinking about the U.S., he does not dismiss Isaiah's position as nonsense. He respects the position. He understands what he's gone through. Yet he does not automatically incorporate that position as his own. He's working through it. This is how it really is in the U.S. Even though the media, when they talk about it, they don't present it that way. They present it as either pick a side, and you're either on one side, and if you have this point of view, you can't be connected to this side, or vice versa. That's not really how it is. And I love how this show reflects Sam working through that, Sam making his own decisions about how he feels. Now coming to understand that the shield does not mean the same thing to everybody. It has a varied past. It has a checkered past. Depending on the context, you're going to think different things about this shield. Carly, I think that's how I pronounce her name. She is an example of that from the Flag Smashers. So I loved how they did this, and they moved it in areas of gray and not so black and white. And I think that that's a fascinating thing. And I'm wondering if you saw that, if you can see what I'm saying. Now, to bring this point home further, I want you to think about the relationships that Sam has in this show, even up to episode 5. His experience with Cap was not one of racism. They were good friends. His experience with Bucky is not one where race tends to be an issue with Bucky. It's a really fascinating thing because as you see Sam move throughout the show until we get to episode 5, he is moving throughout this show in a different way. And it didn't hit me until episode 5. I know that I said in previous reviews that it was important for them to tell the story from a black person's framework if you have a black person as a star in the show. And I still think that's true. I think that that's why we got what we got with Isaiah Bradley and the other things in the show that introduce race. But it just hit me that Sam is moving through this world as someone that's not really seeing race as a big issue. And that is actually, and this is a little bit of a change of view for me, that's why he says to that little boy, "I'm just Falcon, not Black Falcon," when he's walking into the city. Again, representing those two different schools of thought as it deals with race in America. So well done from a writing standpoint. So I love the fact that they tackled it this way. I love the fact that Sam actually comes to his own conclusion, where I feel like at the end of the conversation with his sister, he's thinking, listen, I'm going to walk this middle ground where I am still confident in the U.S., but I'm also confident as a black man, and I can carry this fight forward and carry the shield. I can do both. I'm not necessarily agreeing with Isaiah's ideology that it's impossible to happen in America. He's coming to his own conclusions about things, and I love how they write that. So at the culmination of this, it's really interesting because then we flip back to, is it Harley or is it Carly? Somebody set me straight in the comments, you know. Woo, I'm embarrassed. All right. So we have this conversation, and then we do know that the Leaper is involved. That's how she's gotten some help. And we also know that Agent Carter had conversations with the Leaper, or at least it appeared to be, because we could hear him on the phone cursing and all that kind of good stuff. Now, my theory here is that this is not going to go the way that we're led to think it's going to go. I think the Leaper actually might flip on Carly in those. That's what I think. But we'll see how that goes. But I like the way that this whole thing ends, really setting us up for this big confrontation. We get that scene where Sam opens the box, and we don't get to see what the Wakandans have given him, but we know it's going to be something special. We also got that Easter egg a little bit earlier about Agent, it's a Santos? I can't remember his name. And he tells him to keep the wings. In the comics, he is another version of Falcon. So I absolutely love this. I thought that the storytelling was done. I thought that the closure for Isaiah's story was done really well. But I really want to know what you think about what I shared about the duality of positions here when this show deals with race in this episode. And it's not just hard line. It's not just like all white people are bad. If you're black, you have to think that. But we see the nuances. We see them grappling with the issue of race in the show. And I thought from a writing standpoint that that was so well done. Let me know what you think in the comments below. I'll see you on the next video. Subscribe if you're new here. Peace, everybody.